That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Luther, Never Too Much, which is the 9th documentary feature directed by Don Porter, which premiered in the U.S. documentary competition at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival on January 21st, 2024.
Do I know Don Porter's other works?
You should, I guess, a couple of them, but she's been at Sundance previously with Gideon's Army in 2013, which is about public defenders, and Trapped, an abortion doc in 2016. You might be more familiar with John Lewis, Good Trouble, and also recently the Lady Bird Diaries about Lady Bird Johnson.
What is this documentary about? It chronicles the life of an iconic musical performer, from childhood musical talent to worldwide fame. It explores his collaborations, influences, character, and relationships with family, friends, and fans.
And what worldwide performer is that?
Luther Vandross, who I would say is probably my favorite male vocalist. And I grew up really liking him. Mm-hmm. What's your pull quote?
Don Porter's approach to Luther Vandross plays like a redacted record waiting for declassification. This exploration of an iconic artist mainlines Black excellence, but keeps Black queer excellence quite comfortably in a closet with transparent doors.
Mine. There's an elephant in the room that prevents this documentary from being anything more than an obtuse look at a very talented man. Yeah, so I am a Luther Vandross fan. There wasn't much in this I didn't already know. And I think the premise I read basically explains what it is. I like that it says relationships with family, friends, and fans, because we don't get any personal romantic relationships. Yeah.
I mean, the first hour, I think I was anxious watching it because I'm like, okay, when are we going to get to talking about the life, the authentic life that he didn't get to live? And we don't. But the first hour, it's nice to see all of these archival clips and recordings of him. So I think if you're a fan, this would be must-see. And I really liked hearing some people talk about him, Jamie Foxx, for instance. But what I'm missing is that connective tissue of this man that is known for singing all these love songs that informed all these heterosexuals' lives. Do they realize anything else about this man?
Well, before you get into that, I think, the documentary starts with sort of his love of music. He was a very accomplished background vocalist and vocal arranger. Mm-hmm. And so he worked with a lot of people. I think the most key were David Bowie, Bette Midler, and Roberta Flack.
Yeah.
Sort of his working with them really propelled him into being a solo artist. But outside of that, he was writing jingles. He was, again, like a very sought after background singer. So he had a very successful career. And then, of course, made all the hits we know. We do get some of the key moments, like the car accident he got into in the 90s. 86, where his passenger was killed, which we can talk about. And then, of course, he had a stroke that ultimately led to his death, early death. So there's that. I think, like you mentioned, it's just so interesting to craft a documentary about a person who's known for writing love songs and then avoiding talking about his own relationship with love. But then we have him in the documentary saying that if anyone wants to know about me, all you have to do is listen to the song Any Love.
Well, he tells Oprah that's his favorite song.
And those lyrics basically explain how I feel about my life. And then we have... the one thing that is very clear is that it seems like everyone who knew him loved him and respected him and want to honor him for the way he chose to present himself. So we do have a lot of the people who worked with him talking about him in a very coded way. Mm-hmm. Some of them even say, one in particular says, like, I'm not going to say more than Luther would say about himself. We get a very, very, like a 90-second moment where one person, who we only see in the documentary once, a woman, say that, like, question his sexuality. And then we get a clip from Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, where Patti LaBelle basically says, like, he was in the closet because he felt like he didn't want his mom to know and he didn't want to disappoint his female fans.
That was from 2017.
And that's all we get. Mm-hmm. There's no other mention. But I do find it I don't need to drag Luther Vandross out of the closet. I would have been happy with a fluffy career retrospective, because this documentary really doesn't even give us all of his accomplishments. So if we don't want to talk about him personally, and if people want to respect his, because he even says he wants to be known as this talented vocalist. So then why not make a documentary where we just talk about all of his accomplishments, all of the artists who have sampled his music, all the people he's influenced, have all the people who he worked with talk about him.
If you were a therapist diagnosing this documentary, you would say that there is a major problem with not tying together how I think his weight issues were used as a way to avoid having to talk about his love life. Unlike, say, Ricky Martin, who was, of course, infamously closeted at the onset of his career, and everybody was up in his business about that. And Luther Vandross was able to talk about loving people, and nobody's asking the next logical question, such as Oprah.
Who
was any love written for? Who were you feeling that love for in that moment that you wrote the song? Because you said you were having a moment. You draw comparisons to Tyler Perry and how Oprah handles him.
Oprah's featured, it's very clear that Oprah liked Luther Vandross because he was on her show many, many times, which I remember. And this documentary shows all of those clips. And yes, like you just said, there are obvious moments where she should be digging in. But I think in a similar way to how she handles Tyler Perry, knows that, she knows what it is.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. But getting back to the weight thing, we spend a third of the documentary talking about his weight. And I wish there would have been an examination of what you just alluded to. The reason people were in Ricky Martin's business about who he's sleeping with is because people want to sleep with Ricky Martin.
Yeah.
He's a very attractive man.
Yeah.
Luther Vandross is like a lovable teddy bear. So no one's really interested in hopping in bed with him. And that's why people aren't chopping at the bit to know who he's sleeping with. So I feel like there were obvious things that could have been addressed, but they can't do it because they don't want to talk about his sexuality. So then it just makes me feel like I'm not stupid as the audience.
He speaks about being an emotional eater and having, an unhealthy relationship with food, but that is all tied into how he's not being able to live his authentic self.
And we hear that from his own mouth.
Yes.
He's saying, I'm an emotional eater, but then the people who are speaking for him are saying, well, whenever he was stressed out about the tour or the album, and it's like, okay, girl. There's even one lady who's, we get several sound bites from her. She says, yeah, he would say, when am I going to find love, blah, blah, blah. And the lady goes, we would just tell him, we all love you. Bitch, you know damn well that that's not what he meant. And if you say that to me, I would say, well then shit, girl, let's go get you a man, right? Mm-hmm. If your friend tells you I'm lonely, when am I going to find love? Your response as their friend is well, let's figure out how to get you someone. You don't say well, I love you. Mm-hmm. As someone who's in a platonic relationship.
Watching this,
that's not what he means.
It just was such an odd thing to watch this in 2024 and be like, I'm reverting to how I was trained in the generation I grew up as a gay man, to be a scavenger and to have to dig through these details, such as the car accident from 1986, I think is what we should get into, where he killed somebody, and we get a newspaper clipping that says this 27-year-old man from West Hollywood, and then
was his passenger in his 2-seat Mercedes.
And putting together how Luther's reaction to that was, in Reby Jackson's words, devastational, pleads guilty, tells one of his cohorts that offers to come see him, he needs support. I really need the emotional support right now. This man killed somebody that he was
probably romantically linked to.
Romantically aligned with somehow, and was not able to speak to that.
Again, I don't think we need to drag anyone out of the closet, even retroactively. I just don't understand why introduce themes and concepts and feelings that require additional examination if we're not going to do it. If you really respect this person, don't even bring up all this shit. Just talk about what a star he was and everything he accomplished. So I think in that regard, the documentarians are a little bit of chicken shit, because you're beating around the bush. And in 2024, anyone who knows Luther Vandross and grew up listening to him is we're all sitting there waiting for the obvious. And then for people who might be new to him watching this, I can't imagine a 30-year-old who doesn't know who Luther Vandross is watching this not thinking that man's gay. And why are we not talking about it? So that's the weakness of this. But I do want to mention, we do get a lot of really cool people being interviewed, specifically for the documentary. You mentioned Jamie Foxx. We have Nile Rodgers, who Luther worked with a lot, Roberta Flack, Mariah Carey, Dionne Warwick, Clive Davis. Apparently he was very close friends with Richard Marx. And even hearing Richard Marx talk about him is like, everyone knew that he was gay.
But then it's suspicious to me that Bette Midler was not interviewed, because I believe that she's somebody that would want to speak to the authenticity of Luther.
I do want to say that.
Or Patti LaBelle.
Anything we've ever watched where it talks about like R&B, soul music, like every documentary that I've watched, I feel in the last 5 years, David Bowie is in it. Like he was very highly influenced. And of course, from clips we see in this, he really adored Luther. Immediately, as soon as the documentary starts, we hear Luther saying, I had a great childhood. Like I didn't grow up poor, my parents were great. And then we hear all of his childhood friends. They are saying like his first band was called Shades of Green, and how he wanted them all to wear these like glittered emerald shoes, which is like, okay, girl. And then them telling stories about how he would go to their parents' house to say like, you know, we need $23 to buy these shoes. It just, I don't know. You know that for years and years and years, every time I think about or talk about Luther Vandross, I always say like, oh, Luther, because I just always feel like I loved his music so much. And then I think I always felt like sad for him that he probably didn't get to live like be his authentic self very often.
Yes, and it's not about dragging somebody out of the closet, but it's also not about keeping them like this specimen ensconced in amber either. Like he was not, he's deserved a due that he hasn't been given, I think, in a realization that he couldn't be himself. Just like Whitney Houston, you know.
But I don't know what it would do at this point for his legacy. So I can appreciate why people feel like they want to respect the way he presented himself. That's why I don't think that I should harp about him being gay or not. I just don't think that it's good storytelling to bring up issues that are obviously linked to his romantic life and his sexuality. If we don't want to talk about it, then don't talk about his weight. Don't talk about, but it's hard not to. This man is known for writing love songs.
Well, and the weight thing...
Who did you love?
The weight thing is handled superficially too, because I didn't know he was diabetic previous to this. And that tidbit comes very late in this documentary. But the yo-yoing weight and the effect that has on your body, when he's asked, point blank about how he's lost the weight, he said he just decided to stop eating emotionally, when very clearly that is not the case. So what were you doing? Like those things that whatever he was doing was, I also believe, detrimental to his health.
Well, because I'm sure he was probably taking diet pills, or they were probably giving him like fen-phen or something back in the 90s, and they don't want to say that. So it's like they're trying to respect him, and I appreciate that. Then just don't even talk about it. We all know Big Luther, Little Luther. We all know all of that. So don't talk about it. Just talk about how he was a master musician, is what I think. But some other things. So I didn't know that he went off to college and then didn't go back to his second year because he wanted to pursue music. We also, we get a clip of the OJ singing, and they're wearing these costumes that look exactly like the Rush Poppers bottles.
They do.
Which made me laugh so hard. I knew that Luther was wrote for many, many artists across the board. I didn't know that he wrote Fascination for David Bowie. I thought that was interesting. Oh, Luther's signature vocal flair, that vibrato bass he would do, originated from a jingle he wrote for a Gino's Pizza. And I thought him telling that story was really cute. Then we talk about when he started to become more popular, and then we see Eddie Murphy make a joke about him relating to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then we see Luther in concert after that joke was made bring out a big bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken while Eddie Murphy is in the audience at his concert, and then someone saying that Luther handled a lot of the criticism with humor, but it still hurt him. And it's okay, I feel like that was you bring this kind of shit up, it's well, then why aren't we talking about the obvious things that people are making fun of? Because it was more than just his weight.
Yes.
I didn't know that Never Too Much was the song he got signed with. I didn't realize he had such a hard time getting signed. I guess I didn't realize that he wasn't having the crossover success, because to me, he was a very big star. I didn't realize that it wasn't until his 10th Grammy nomination that he actually won. And that his first number one song, it was during that period where he had the stroke.
Dancing
and was
with
recovering from that stroke when he won the Grammy for it. So that's kind of wild. Hearing Mariah Carey talk about him, I thought was really sweet. Even Dionne Warwick, we see her talking, and then we get an extended clip of her watching him pay tribute to her, and she's emotional. I thought that was really beautiful. It's crazy how Clive Davis has outlived Aretha, Whitney, Luther, and he's still here looking as decrepit as he wants to be.
Looking the same forever, talking in all these documentaries.
But the final note I have is, I think I got most emotional watching. So apparently he had an assistant. It's not explained for how many years, but it's this obviously gay white man who probably, so based on the timing, was much younger when he was Luther's assistant. And him discovering Luther when he had the stroke and talk. It's just like the way he's talking about it in this coded manner, trying to be respectful, but clearly very emotional. He talks about learning about the song Any Love and what it meant to Luther.
And how he doesn't like that song.
And how he doesn't like it because he knows the truth. And it's just like, it's on the tip of his tongue. And I think the emotion that that man had talking about Luther, like, it's kind of like the emotion I feel thinking about Luther. Like, I don't know.
I think they did a good... Don Porter does a good job. I was emotional at the part where he finally wins his first Grammy, and the kind of the setup to that, to let us see what is going on emotionally probably with him as he is accepting that award.
I think he was a beautiful soul who made beautiful music. I think if you like Luther, you should watch this documentary. If you've never heard of him, I think you should watch the documentary. What would you give Luther Never Too
And I
Much?
also recommend, I think there's a Sundance doc, or maybe 20 Feet from Stardom.
Okay.
Well, Lisa Fischer.
No, I know.
And anyway.
It's just every time I ask you for the score, you don't give it.
I wasn't ready yet.
You could just give it and then continue, but okay.
2.5.
Yeah, Lisa Fischer's in it. I would give it 2.5 out of 5 as well. Anything else?
No.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.